Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly excited to jump into this with you today. Just think about the gaming landscape right now, right? Xbox is a total household name. It's so deeply embedded in modern pop culture that it feels like it's literally always been there, right next to Nintendo and PlayStation. But today, we're going to dive into the whole story of the foundation of Xbox, and you know what? Its existence was never guaranteed, not even close. It's this dramatic, highly unlikely origin story of how Microsoft, a company that was known strictly for enterprise software and desktop operating systems, somehow forced its way into the intensely competitive world of console gaming. The journey from a crazy internal pitch to a living room staple, it is absolutely packed with massive financial risks, legendary executive meltdowns, and, well, a few very lucky breaks. Let's get right into it.
So, how did a PC software giant conquer the living room? We often look back and picture Microsoft as this unstoppable Goliath, just steamrolling its way into the gaming industry because, they had endlessly deep pockets. But the reality on the ground? Completely the opposite. They didn't boldly march into the console market because they saw a fun, lucrative new revenue stream. No way. They entered it because they were fighting a desperate defensive war. They were absolutely terrified of being made completely obsolete in the modern home.
Check out this number, 85%. In 1998, Microsoft controlled a staggering 85% of the global personal computer market. To put that into perspective, over 100 million PCs were sold worldwide that year, and the vast majority of them, they ran Windows. Microsoft was essentially printing money. They were dictating the terms of the digital age. But you know what happens when you're at the absolute top of the mountain, right? You get intensely paranoid about anyone who might try to knock you down. They were terrified of losing that dominance. And a new, unprecedented threat was looming on the horizon, and it had absolutely nothing to do with desktop computers. Section 1. The PlayStation 2 Threat. A Goliath on the Defensive. Okay, so to really grasp the existential dread that pushed CEO Bill Gates into the highly expensive, entirely unfamiliar hardware business, we have to travel back to 1999. Sony had just announced the PlayStation 2, but they didn't just announce a toy for playing games. No, Sony brilliantly positioned the PS2 as a complete home entertainment hub. Right out of the box, it played audio CDs, it played video DVDs. Sony's ultimate vision was that this sleek, black machine would just sit quietly under your television and replace the desktop PC entirely for home entertainment. To Bill Gates, the PS2 wasn't just a game console. It was a Trojan horse aimed directly at the heart of Microsoft's core business. So this forced Microsoft into immediate action. They couldn't just sit by, they had to fight back to keep control of the living room. Section 2. DirectX versus Web TV. The Internal Civil War. Now, once Microsoft actually decided they needed to build a console to counter Sony, the immediate reaction internally wasn't unity, it was total chaos. The directive sparked a massive ideological civil war inside the company over exactly how to build this thing. On one side, you had the DirectX team. Their vision was essentially to build a PC in a box. They wanted to use repurposed PC components, include a built-in hard drive, which, by the way, was completely unheard of for consoles at the time, and run the whole system on a variation of the robust Windows 2000 operating system. Then, on the other side, you had the Web TV team. They were pushing for a much more traditional console approach, a build-from-scratch appliance running on a lightweight, stripped-down OS called Windows CE, utilizing a custom graphics chip. The DirectX team argued vehemently that their architecture would allow PC developers to easily port their games over, but the Web TV team pointed out, rightly so, that their bespoke appliance model would be far cheaper and way safer to manufacture. Section 3. The Valentine's Day Massacre. The Coffin Box Climaxes. This internal war over the hardware birthed a pretty grim nickname for the project, the Coffin Box. The engineers pushing that PC in a box vision were genuinely terrified. They knew that the massive costs of manufacturing a console using literal off-the-shelf PC parts, combined with the incredibly high failure rate of their early prototypes, could very well end their careers at Microsoft. It was just a massive financial gamble for a software company. They legitimately felt like they were busy hammering the nails into their own professional coffins. And all of this tension and fear finally boiled over on February 14th, 2000. Happy Valentine's Day, right? On this day, Bill Gates held a pivotal meeting with the Xbox team, and by all accounts, it was an absolute bloodbath. He furiously vented about the insane cost proposals for the DirectX version of the console, plus he was incredibly angry that this new machine seemingly marginalized Windows, completely stripping away the standard Windows interface that, made Microsoft famous. For hours, he just yelled at the executives in the room. The project was practically dead right then and there. But then, as the meeting dragged on, someone finally reminded him about Sony. They reminded Gates that if they didn't endure these costs and build this machine, Sony would undoubtedly own the living room forever. Recognizing that overarching existential threat to his software empire, Gates swallowed his anger, authorized a massive marketing budget, and fully greenlit the DirectX team's incredibly risky vision. Section 4. Naming the DirectX box. Marketing's worst nightmare. So, with the hardware project finally approved, they ran straight into another hilarious and honestly incredibly messy hurdle. They had this wildly expensive, powerful machine and absolutely no idea what to call it. The engineering team had naturally been calling their project the DirectX box, which shortened to Xbox in all their internal emails. But the marketing department, they absolutely hated it. They thought it sounded way too aggressive and tech-heavy. They actually preferred terrible corporate acronyms like WEP, the Windows Entertainment Project. I mean, come on. They also pitched highly sterilized names like 11X or the Microsoft Interactive Center. Marketing was desperate to avoid using the development team's nerdy working title at all costs. But in a brilliant twist of corporate irony, the marketing department put the name Xbox into consumer-focused testing purely as a control variable. Yeah, they only included it on the list of potential names to mathematically prove to the stubborn engineers just how badly it would fail with everyday consumers. But when the results came back, the focus groups loved it. It won overwhelmingly against absolutely everything the marketing team had come up with. Consumers chose Xbox, and marketing was forced to swallow their pride and concede. Section 5. The Duke and the Chief. Big hardware, bigger games. When the physical console finally launched in 2001, the hardware itself was a massive, unprecedented gamble. They packed it with a powerful 733 MHz Intel Pentium 3 CPU and a custom NVIDIA GPU, making it a true powerhouse. Even crazier, it was the very first console to ever feature a built-in hard drive, totally eliminating the need for players to buy those annoying, tiny memory cards just to save their progress. But the absolute most fascinating gamble, the built-in Ethernet port. Remember, in 2001, slow dial-up internet was still the absolute norm for most households. Putting a broadband Ethernet port in home console was a visionary, wildly expensive decision. The engineers argued fiercely that it was absolutely essential for the future of online gaming, and that stubborn choice ultimately paved the way for the revolutionary Xbox Live network. However, building a console out of literal PC parts did lead to some pretty serious physical design quirks. The original controller, affectionately known as the Duke, was absolutely massive. It was huge because the engineers literally had to design the plastic shell around bulky, split PC circuit boards that were already in mass production. It was so big and unwieldy that during an early presentation, the console's co-creator, Seamus Blackley, actually had golf balls thrown at him in protest by developers. Can you imagine? The backlash was fierce, especially in regions like Japan where smaller hands made the Duke practically unusable. Microsoft had to pivot fast, quickly replacing it globally with the much more ergonomic Controller S. But ultimately, all those hardware quirks, the shockingly heavy console, the giant golf ball-provoking controller, the massive financial risk, none of it mattered because of one single piece of software, Halo Combat Evolved. Just before launch, Microsoft made a clutch last-minute acquisition of a studio named Bungie, securing Halo as a strict exclusive for their new box. It became the ultimate killer app, a complete masterpiece of a first-person shooter that single-handedly justified buying the heavy hardware. Without Master Chief and the incredible multiplayer experience of Halo, the entire Xbox experiment likely would have crashed and burned right there at the starting line. Section 6. The Xbox Legacy, the Strategic Circle. So how did that chaotic, fear-driven 2001 foundation actually shape the next 2.5 decades of this massive brand? Tracing the generations tells a truly fascinating story of identity. They started in 2001 with the original Xbox, establishing that PC-in-a-box concept. By 2005, they refined that initial vision flawlessly into the Xbox 360, becoming an absolute online powerhouse that defined a whole generation of multiplayer gaming. But then, 2013 hit, and they experienced a major brand-damaging stumble with the Xbox One by completely forgetting exactly who they were building for. Ultimately, by 2020, with the launch of the Series X and S, they recognized their error and returned fully to their roots with high-end, PC-like architecture. Zooming in on that 2013 stumble with the Xbox One really proves why their original foundation was just so crucially important. With the Xbox One, Microsoft totally lost the plot. They pivoted hard, prioritizing TV integration and multimedia features over actual gaming. They forced users to buy the Kinect peripheral for mandatory voice controls, pushing the price tag to a hefty $499. They completely alienated the core, dedicated gamers who had actually built the brand's success over the previous decade. By moving away from their gaming-first PC power foundation and trying to build a generic TV appliance, they essentially handed Sony's PlayStation 4 a massive, generation-defining market advantage that Microsoft is honestly still battling today. But, a company like Microsoft learns from its painful mistakes. Fast forward to today as we look toward 2026 and beyond. Following the recent retirement of longtime boss Phil Spencer, the division is now spearheaded by a new executive, Asha Sharma, and the overarching strategy has remarkably come full circle. They are leaning heavily back into that original 1999 direct Xbox philosophy, focusing on an open platform, highly capable, PC-like ecosystem. By heavily leveraging their Game Pass subscription service and the incredibly powerful PC-like architecture of the Series X and S consoles, they are stabilizing the ship. How? By remembering exactly what made them great in the first place. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If a multi-billion-dollar giant can lose its way simply forgetting its foundation, what happens next now that they've finally remembered it? From the terrifying days of the coffin box to becoming a living room champion, the entire history of Xbox proves that your core identity is absolutely your strongest possible asset. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into gaming history. Stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.